while the doggies are snoozing away, I have the pattern printed off. I took my measurements and then I have taped all these pieces because I just printed it on printer paper at home. I've taped them all together, and then I'm gonna go in and kind of mark which line I need to be on based off of my measurements and start cutting it out. We also have Martha Stewart keeping us company. So here are my measurements, and you can see that some of them correspond with an exact letter, but you can also see that I don't have, one letter in every measurement. So basically what that means is, so take the bust to the underbust, that's E and F. So then at this bust line, I'll start at the E line here, but then by the time I get to the underbust, I need to transition down to this F line. So now I need to go and do that to every single pattern piece according to these measurements. Last night I finished cutting out all the pieces according to my measurements, so now we go up into the studio and we start marking it out on the fabric. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, this is going to be sort of a practice run for my next Passages photo, but I do still want this to be a costume that I use for something. So here's the inspiration behind it. A few days ago it snowed and I really wanted to go out and take pictures in the snow, but I'm at the point with my photography where I'm kind of done just like going out to take photos just to take photos. I want there to be, which there's nothing wrong with that, but for me personally, I want there to be more like storytelling and craftsmanship behind what I create. So I thought, why don't I just make something that I can't use for this particular snowstorm, but if I make something now, I'll have a costume at the ready for the next time it snows, or if we go somewhere with snow. So I started looking around what I do have that I could use, and one of the pieces that I've kept forever is this hat that I got with my family when they were living in Russia. And I've never had anything to really like wear it with, so I thought this is the perfect opportunity. I have these curtains that are pretty much exactly the same color, and I thought what I would do is make the corset out of this, maybe make a whole dress, I'm not sure, and then at least on the corset do some stitching like is on this hat. And then to go over the corset, because this is not exactly like winter friendly, I have this old bedding that used to be on our bedspread. It's too thick for us and it was falling apart, so we got new stuff. But I hated throwing away this beautiful quilted fabric. So this might be cool to make sort of like an overdress or a cloak or something to go with the corset. So that's the plan. I'm at the part of corset making that I hate potentially more than any of the other parts. Tracing the seam allowance, because I have to mark whatever my seam allowance is around each of these things and do little dots and then trace the line in between the dots, and it takes forever. So I'll see you in like an hour, I guess. Okay, I got all of the corset pieces marked out, and then I picked out a lining and got all the corset pieces marked out on that. But now I'm kind of at a stopping point because I want to put embroidery on the corset, and I realized I think it'll be easiest when it's still, pretend this is like actually the piece, when it's still one solid piece of fabric, so I'm not messing with like ruining cut edges because those tend to fray, or just like a million little fiddly pieces. So I'm kind of stuck right now until I can get an embroidery hoop. Hopefully the next update is from tonight when I have acquired an embroidery hoop and can start doing the embroidery. I did these little bits on a hoop before I cut out the pieces because I was worried. This fabric is so loosely woven that I know as soon as I cut it, it's just gonna start fraying. So I wanted to do all the embroidery beforehand, but then I realized as I was getting like really close to like down here by the seams, if I need to adjust this at all, this will get like cut off. So I'm going to switch directions again, and I'm gonna cut all these pieces out, pin them, and sew them all together. And then I'll do some embroidery. I'll probably have to do fray check on all the edges or something, just to stabilize it while I do the embroidery. We'll see. So here's the tricky part with corsets. When you are pinning them together, which is what I have to do now, you have to make sure that you pin on both pieces exactly on the right spot on this line. Because if you don't, if you're like 1/8 of an inch off, because there's 8 panels, that means, or however many panels, you could be up to 1 inch off by the end of the time you're sewing all of them together. So corsets have to be like super exact. So now I have to go pin, and it's going to take me a while because I have to get the pins in exactly the right spot. So wish me luck. I'll probably see you this evening. I got the pieces all pinned together, and as I suspected, it is fraying a lot. So I'm trying to be really gentle with it. I am now stitching it together, and then I might go in and, rather than fray checking it, serging all the edges. Probably should have done that before I did this part, but you live and you learn. Okay, my daughter broke my phone tripod, so I'm having to get creative with how I hold it. So things might be a little bit wonky, but where we left off last, I was about to go on vacation, and I had just started embroidering the outer shell of the corset. Right now I have in front of me the lining. I've continued to embroider the outer shell. It's about 80% of the way there. But yeah, right now I'm working on this lining. It is a much thicker material than the outer shell because you need structure and support. So I'm hoping this lining will achieve that. And yeah, once I have this cut out and assembled, then I can start adding the boning channels and the waist tape to this. And then once all the structure is put in place in the lining, then I will add the outer shell. So basically what that means is all of the strain that is happening as you're tightening it around your body is going to be happening to this layer and not the very thin outer lining. That's the hope. But anyway, yeah, now we do all the cutting for the lining, which takes forever, but not as much as the pinning. That really takes forever. Before I finish cutting out this last piece, I wanted to talk about a little tip that I had. If you are working on something that requires really exact measurements, like a corset or a coat or, something like that, it's not kind of like a loose, flowy garment. It's better to put your pattern down on your fabric and then trace around it. So that's what this inner line is. And then remove the pattern piece, and then with a ruler mark out your seam allowance, and then you go in and you cut the fabric along your seam allowance line. And basically the reason you want to do this is because if you look when you cut, see how it's lifting up the fabric? If you had a pattern piece laying on top of that, it could slightly warp the fabric so that it's not cutting the exact measurement that you want. And for things like corsets where, there's 10 to 12 to 20 pieces, if you're 1/8 of an inch off on every piece, that's, that could be up to 1 inch off. So this is just a good practice to do whenever you need something to be really, really super exact. And if you were looking at those bright green lines on my fabric and going, Okay, but like, how do you get rid of those? How do you hide the lines? I would highly recommend using these friction pens. They are completely erasable once you iron them. The ink completely disappears. Or if you don't want to go out and buy new things, you can also use, like, they have chalk markers. Okay, now that all my pieces are cut out, I have to go in and I have to mark, because I forgot to do this. I should have done this earlier. I forgot to mark the bust, under bust, and waist lines on my pieces, because basically when you're pinning it, you will pin your bust line to your bust line, your under bust lines together, your waist lines together, etc. first, and then you will go and pin in between them, because then you can make sure that the correct parts of each pattern piece are lining up together and your fabric will pull properly. I have my different, mid-hip, waistline, under bust points marked out on these pieces. So I'm going to show you kind of what I mean. So you see how there's these marks here, here, and here. So when you're pinning them together, you'd pin these together, these together, these together. And basically that just helps when you're navigating like really weird curves like this that are usually present on a corset. It helps you make sure that it all gets matched up appropriately, so that you don't start here and then by the time you get down here they're like an inch or two off. It is Friday evening and we just got back from my parents' house. We did a little movie night. I brought the project over to work on while we were over there, and I was going to focus on getting all the embroidery finished, but I'm pretty sure my daughter got into my purse and misplaced the embroidery floss somewhere in my mom's house, so I can't finish that now until I have replacement thread. But I did bring the lining to work on as well, and I got this side all basted together. So now I just need to baste this side, and then I can go and actually sew it together. And if you're wondering what the snoring is in the background, it's this lovely lady, Freya. Yeah, she's out. Last night I finished basting all of the lining pieces of the corset together, and so tonight all I have to finish is this one little panel on the outer lining, doing all the embroidery on it. And I was stuck on this because I ran out of embroidery floss, but I went on Saturday with my grandma to the thrift store, and they happened to have a little packet of embroidery floss for $2 that had the correct color in it. And I call that fate. Now that these are all basted together, I get to do the fun part of sewing it with the sewing machine. And then we work on adding the boning channels. If I could name one thing that has dramatically improved my sewing, it is being better about ironing. Let me show you the difference. So this is ironed. Look how beautiful and flat and nice that lays. This is not ironed. It makes such a difference. So if you've been lazy with your ironing like I used to be, don't be. Because this is the difference between so pretty and like meh. We're all ironed. I've trimmed the seam allowances down so that they're very minimal. And now I get to pick out, I always just use bias tape for the boning channels and the waist tape that's gonna go across like this. So I get these honestly at the thrift store, and they're always like $1 or 50 cents, and they just make my life so much easier. So now I just need to pick out which one I'm going to use. The waist tape is now pinned in place, so I just have to sew it. This is basically the area of the corset around your waist that has the highest amount of tension and pulling. And so putting this tape in helps keep the corset together so it doesn't start pulling apart at the seams. I just finished doing the boning channels on both sides of the lining. So now I need to work on getting this guy ready to be attached to the lining. Mostly just ironing it and making sure everything is looking good. Last night I finished putting in all the boning channels, and I couldn't decide if I wanted, because remember I want this to be reversible, so when I wear it in reverse, so when this side is in front, I couldn't decide if I wanted it to be this or have the boning channels show. And I'm still kind of torn, but I did a poll on Instagram, and the no boning channels won, and I feel like I am slightly kneeling that way as well. So we're gonna go ahead and put the two pieces together with this side facing in / out when I wear it in reverse, if that makes sense. I just got out my busk, which, if you're unfamiliar with what a busk is, basically this makes it so that you put this in the front, in between the two front pieces, so you can like kind of button yourself into your corset without having to undo all of the lacing in the back, which makes it a lot easier if, like, for instance, with this case, this is going to be a self-portrait, I'm getting myself ready, then I can just basically buckle myself in. But here's the problem. As you can see, the busk is way too short. And we're kind of on a spending freeze right now because my husband got laid off. So I kind of have to just work with this. So what I think I'm gonna do, I'm pivoting a little, is I'm gonna put this in still, and then once I have it all sewn in and flipped around and ready to go, I'm gonna attach some like decorative fasteners here to kind of fasten the last little top part, and I think it'll end up looking cool. I hope it will, because like I don't really have another choice. So I messed up massively on the corset. Basically I just like wasn't thinking things through, and I cut a hole in the lining fabric thinking like, oh yeah, it'll be strong enough even if there's a, no, like just. So anyway, I then spent like an entire night trying to correct this mistake, and it just kept like getting worse and worse and worse. So eventually what I ended up doing is, even though I had it already sewn together, these first two panels I ripped off, recut, and had to redo. Which was a bummer because I did not quite have enough fabric for this side. So you can see here, I did a little bit, I added 2 pieces. My daughter is in here with me. But I'm thinking it's gonna be hemmed about there, and then I could put like a decorative trim on the bottom to hide this little seam. So it's gonna work out, but just a little snafu set me back a little bit. But we are now rolling forward again. Okay, so I corrected all the mistakes, got the new pieces that I had to redo sewn on, and everything's sewn together. So now I just need to do another iron, and then I can add the boning, the grommets for the lace-up back, and oh, the busk. My husband is hanging out with my daughter for the last few minutes before it's time for her to go to bed. So I have some time to work on the project, but I need to first address this situation. It did buy me a good 30 minutes of work time while she was awake, so that I consider a win. Minus the boning and the floppiness, it's starting to actually look like a corset now. I have the busk in place, so obviously it's not going to fit right because I have a giant wool sweater on, but and for funsies, here's the reverse. Saturday, and I just got back up here in the studio working on my corset. I got all of the grommets in on one side, so that means I just have to put the grommets in on this side, and then I can try it on, which I'm so excited about. Let's see if I can bust it out before my daughter wakes up from her nap. The other thing is, there is a forecast for snow on Wednesday. It's Saturday, remember. 90% chance we'll get 3 to 5 inches. So I'm wondering if I'm crazy thinking that maybe I can get this whole thing done, even though I haven't even finished the corset, by Wednesday. We'll see. Okay, she is all laced up. She has the boning in. I haven't finished the bottom, but I need to try her on. it is in need at this point. Okay, so obviously up here is not exactly right because I still need to do some sort of like fastener in the middle, but everything else is looking pretty good. I've been up here in my studio working for the last like 30 minutes or so on getting all the boning trimmed down. So I have half of it done. I have one side. Now I need to go in and trim all these edges off of the other half. I hate this part. This is, I think, my least favorite part of making a corset is cutting boning. But I'm almost done.